All right, we're good to go if you want to take it away, Key.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I just want to say it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2025 SUNY Graduate Research and Creative Activities Conference. As president of the SUNY University Faculty Senate and member of the faculty here at SUNY Purchase, where I'm at this morning, I want to begin by congratulating all of our graduate student presenters. Today's conference highlights the vibrant intellectual life that thrives across our campuses, and more importantly, the power of research and creativity to drive progress in our communities, in our professions, and society at large. So if you've had a chance to look over the program, you'll see it's really kind of a remarkable showcase of the diversity, depth, and relevance of graduate scholarship here at SUNY. We'll hear today from students developing AI tools for education and healthcare. That reflects the panel that I'm going to be convening later this morning. Investigating public health disparities, exploring equity and inclusion through social science and historical research, and tackling pressing environmental, biomedical, and technological challenges. I mean, between the two panel presentations and the wide variety of posters we'll see across the breakout rooms, you'll see that diversity. Whether it's advancing our understanding of mental health, improving diagnostic tools through machine learning, or analyzing the role of popular culture in reshaping identity, today's work reminds us why graduate education is essential to the mission of public higher education. This conference is also a celebration of the value of SUNY to promote openness, inquiry, collaboration, and the pursuit of knowledge for the public good. And that's a theme I've really been hitting a lot these days, that we really want to focus on promoting public higher education as a public good. And I want to thank everyone today for their work along these lines. It's a chance for us to learn from one another, to ask bold questions, and to imagine new possibilities. And so I encourage all of you to engage with today's panels, with the poster sessions, make connections, let yourselves be inspired by the outstanding work that's on display. So I want to thank also the organizers for making this event possible, and also to the faculty and mentors who support our graduate students every step of the way. It's very important, the role that you play in the development of our graduate students. But most of all, obviously, thank you to our students for your passion, your insight, and your commitment to shaping a better future through research and creativity. Welcome again, and I wish you all a stimulating and successful conference. I'll be around. Like I say, I'm hosting one of the panels later. I hope to get in to see some of the breakout sessions, and looking forward to a wide variety of research being on display today. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Keith, for opening this fourth Graduate Research and Creative Activities Conference from SUNY-wide. So again, this conference is the fourth in a series of successful SUNY-wide Graduate Research and Creative Activities Conference. And it has for goals pretty much to showcase the excellence in graduate students' research across the SUNY system, and also to promote cross-campus research exchanges. So as Keith said, we hope that you're gonna be able to, for example, contribute questions to the panel, to the poster sessions. So it's a great opportunity for networking as well. So this year the theme was open, so the themes have emerged from the submitted research in all disciplines. And based on this research, we have organized two panels, one on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and one on generative AI, which are two themes that really have emerged as particularly important this year. And we will also have 8 poster sessions in parallel. Also remember there will be awards for best oral presentation and panel and for best poster. So the themes that have emerged this year in alphabetical order have been biomedical informatics, computer science and engineering. This is new this year in comparison with the previous year. Diversity, equity and inclusion, education, environmental science, history and economics. So it's also a new theme that has emerged this year. Medicine and mental health and psychology. So as you see, this is very varied, and the reach actually this year has been larger than last year. We have 17 SUNY campuses, which is more than last year. We had only 13, and we received 62 abstracts. So as you can see, we have received abstracts from not only the university centers, as expected, for their excellence in research, but also from a number of smaller institutions, comprehensive institutions, and pretty much most of the campuses having some graduate education have submitted some abstracts. So we will shortly hear our distinguished professor invited speaker, and I'm going to present her very shortly. After that, we will have the first panel, a lunch break, and then a second panel, the generative AI panel. And after that, we will move to the poster sessions. You're going to use the same Zoom link, and from that link, you will be able to choose a breakout session. And also remember, there will be a short conclusion at the end of the conference at 3:20. So if you can stay until then, that will be great. I want to acknowledge all those who made this conference possible. The conference has been co-organized by the University Faculty Senate, Graduate Academic Programs and Research Committee, and the Center for Professional Development. Our deepest thanks go to the State University of New York for its funding, in particular, the University Faculty Senate and its chair, Trustee Landa, for their generous support, without which the conference would not have been able to take place. And also the Center for Professional Development has been instrumental for co-organizing the conference, preparing the website, the registrations, the review system. In particular, thank you to Michaela Ram and Megan Martin. And I want also to thank all the members of the University Faculty Senate Graduate Academic Programs and Research Committee. We have met throughout the year to organize this conference and reviewed all the abstracts submitted. So all students have received at least 3 reviews, and most more than that. So as you can see, this committee has representation from many SUNY campuses and has been very active this year. So thank you to all of them. And then, of course, I want to thank particularly the distinguished research professor Johnston Anumanuo, who is contributing the keynote address. Trustee Nanda for his contribution to the generative AI panel that's forthcoming. And of course, the graduate students, so without whom this conference would not happen, who contributed excellent abstracts, very interesting research, and we're going to present. Also want to thank their faculty mentors for advising them in this excellent research. And we want also to thank all the attendees for your interest and support of our talented students. And please don't hesitate to ask questions. The students, I'm sure, will appreciate it. So now it's time to turn to our outstanding keynote speaker, Professor Ibipo Johnston Anumonwo. Professor Ibipo Johnston Anumonwo from SUNY Cortland Geography Department holds the title of Distinguished Research Professor, which is the highest academic rank at SUNY. Professor Johnston Anumonwo received her Bachelor of Education in Teacher Education from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, and a Master of Education with a concentration in International Development from Harvard Graduate School of Education. She was awarded a PhD from Clark University, where her dissertation study focused on a geographic perspective on occupational segregation. Just a few highlights. Professor Ibipo Johnston Anumonwo is an innovative scholar in academic areas that include urban geography, feminist geography, and other topics related to equity and social justice. She's recognized for her work at the statewide, national, and international level, and she has a distinguished and exceptional record of academic and professional service, and has made significant contributions to SUNY Cortland, the geography discipline, and the community. So welcome, Professor Ibipo Johnston Anumonwo.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
And I'm also trying to see if I can share my screen.
Yep, you are sharing.
Oh, excellent. So thank you very much indeed. Good morning to everybody.
Oh, I do just want to say we are seeing the presenter version of the slideshow. So you might just want to hit up there, yep, display settings. And then do swap. Yep, right there. Perfect. Now it looks great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that Megan?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Keith. And thank you very much, Dr. Isabel Bichindatse, everybody who's been on the organizing committee. I'm really highly honored to have been chosen to be the keynote speaker for this event. It's very rare that four-year comprehensive colleges like ours get this kind of honor. So I'm really, really pleased. Thank you very much also to all the people present, the audience, but especially to the presenters themselves, the graduate students and all the reviewers who have helped to enable this kind of successful display of the hard work that students do. The title of my presentation, as you can see, reads Practices and Perspectives in Geography to Address Prevailing Challenges. That sounds something like one would like to see on a resume. But in reality, I think what I'd like to talk about is a synthesis of what I consider my academic career in geography that demonstrates my scholarship, research, and my work as an educator. So as a geography educator and scholar, like my other colleagues, I think we're at a point where there's a lot of opportunity as well as challenge for us to address prevailing concerns of social justice and global equity. From my point of view, I always attempt to adopt a global perspective. So in my presentation today, I'll use the kinds of global examples as well as US examples that I have integrated into my work, both as an educator and as a scholar in geography. This allows us to have both cross-cultural analysis and international ones, and to also underscore non-ethnocentric views while looking at power relationships internally and maybe at the corporate level, at the household level, at different scales of analysis. So whether we are looking at materials, old-time videos, contemporary social media, well-trusted print materials, or even our journal publications, we can see how a discipline like geography, which prides itself at studying questions related to where and why, is very robust. For instance, let me cite that in the professional organization, the American Association of Geographers, there are over 70 specialty groups, including regional ones like specializing in Africa, or things that you all know geography for, things like cartography. Or right here in my own department with colleagues who are specialists in GIS, with degrees in SUNY institutions, SUNY Buffalo, and my own area in urban geography, or even human geography, which is what I teach here at SUNY Cortland at the undergraduate level. With human geography, one could ask questions of where and why by compounding it to include who, that's human, which people, which groups of people get what, resources, where, what places, why, explanation, and how, methodology. We even have in the AAG a graduate student affinity group. So just to show how supportive professional groups can be of graduate research. And once upon a time, that was me, the graduate school I went to, Clark University. So how about we start with maps? New Yorker's view of the world, since we are New York. Okay, so this is humorous. But amongst the things that geographers study is the mental maps and the perception that people have. So do New Yorkers really have an accurate or a biased view of the United States? No, I don't think my audience do. I think this is just, you all have good, proper perceptions of the United States. Not everybody in New York think that we in upstate are not New York. Moving on, I also trust that most people in this audience know that Africa is not a country, and that internationally or locally, nationally, we have a good understanding of the world around us. There's a lot of content we can use. Many of them have been well tested, tried, to allow us to get a broadened lens through global learning, social justice, promoting attitudes that are broad-minded. So we could think of TED Talks like Amanda's Danger of a Single Story, which I hope many people know or will consult, or even classics way before people like us were born. I'll call it Nasirema, but for those of you who are looking, let's try and spell that backwards, and we see how we can. Okay, so it's American. Challenge meets and, move on to a open-minded analysis. This is a solid framework of geographers. Other materials might be simple as straightforward as charts, the kind of illustrations we use in our research as scholars. In this particular example, I'm using a World Bank chart that lists the role of women in food production in Africa. So on the right, it tells us the total average. But as geographers, we can also see locational disparities, so that countries like Uganda, Tanzania, and Malawi have higher than average participation of women in food production, whereas countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Niger have less than average. So this tells us something. But at this aggregated scale, we are not seeing everything about the comprehensive understanding that other methods in geography can enable. For instance, consider what is lost. When one does not understand the very survival of the continent Africa and of Africans depend heavily on women's work. Yet if we look at those kinds of aggregated data, much of that work is overlooked and undercounted. A favorite example of mine is how we have lots of data, census data about the gallons of pipe-borne water in a village, about the miles of pipes in a community, about the number of cows that a family has. But we do not have information that we can analyze in our research about the number of buckets that a woman carries on her head daily, the number of hours that she spends milking the cows, things like that. If we look at those kinds of information as data sources, then alternative kinds of methodology, such as time budget studies in a framework that we refer to as time geography, or other forms of participatory methods will inform our research more comprehensively. Indeed, in human geography, here's a classic statement from one of my mentors, my advisor, Susan Hansen, who's shown in that picture, about the importance of being inclusive rather than not excluding, have the human in human geography. So that would be a feminist geography perspective. Just to emphasize more about that, using that example of agriculture, what are women doing? Who is being paid for the work on the fields? Women's unpaid work for weeding compared to men who get wages. Women who have to do the work with these hands compared to men who use labor-saving devices like bicycles. If we translate all those into inequities about who has the land, who has access to labor or money, or even time, many people in the audience, even as scholars, young or old, understand this as resources, and they can readily relate to these kinds of perspectives. For comparative analysis, one could look at classics, whether they're videos that compare the treatment of one subgroup of population with another, or one could even extend these to other locations. So it's not just United States. We could look at what's happening in other parts of the world, here and there, then and now, longitudinal analysis, cross-cultural comparative analysis, like I sometimes do in my class and in my research between United States and South Africa. We could think of land alienation as things that happened in the colonial past over there in Zimbabwe, but how about what's going on right now, currently, in terms of land grab universities in the United States and in the SUNY system? I pivot to pictures, field work. This is courtesy of one of our colleagues here at the Geography Department, Dr. Richard Hunter, where students can just go around the community where they are. This is a regular corner store that you would find in any town, upstate New York, downstate. It could be Yonkers, in this case, Syracuse. But what you would typically associate with an inner city location, where you can find limited access to grocery items. Contrast that to, all right, maps, geographers draw maps. The kinds of big box stores that you find on the outskirts at the interstate of many American cities, Binghamton, Buffalo, in this case, Syracuse, I-81, I-90, the smiley face, so we'll call those Walmart. Unlike the food, the corner store, which would be the inner city location, only people who have cars can go to these other locations out in the suburbs to purchase their grocery. Contrast the price of something like pasta sauce in the corner store with the suburban Walmart. High disparity. To go with your pasta, to go with your pasta sauce, you need the pasta. Same idea. So people who are stuck and who do not have access to cars end up paying more for their daily needs. Sometimes it's just reading a single article from a magazine, a geography journal called Focus. A map is worth 1,000 words, maybe. A picture is worth less than 1,000 words. And this just shows the stark divide, racial divide, that's still very pervasive in American cities. We often think that this is restricted to the Deep South, places like Atlanta, Birmingham, Alabama. But the reality is maps like this that show inner city, people of color, and suburban white population are also true of the Northeast. The most segregated cities in America remain places like Milwaukee, Detroit, and guess what? Even here in New York State, Buffalo, New York is about maybe the 4th most segregated, with the same pattern of inner city Black and suburban white residential segregation. So whether we are looking at colors or dots, the pattern of residential segregation remains pervasive. It's one thing to describe the where, which is the locational pattern. It's a different thing that geographers do to explain what's going on. And in this particular scenario, I share the patterns and the explanations, the reasons with my student using simple things like P for preference. Another way of saying, maybe sometimes people do choose to live in particular neighborhoods, Little Havana, Little Haiti, Chinatown. But we can't just say it's preference because there's also economic constraints. So people who are poor are less likely to be able to afford to live in the suburbs or even commute to the suburbs for employment. So they find themselves living more in central city locations. There's also the dimension of prejudice, attitudes, or even practices, everything from redlining to denying people of color loans for access to good housing. In spite of, shall I say, laws like the Fair Housing Act, there remain policies, whether they're transportation policies or land use policies, that also contribute to segregation. As one of my students demonstrated in his research about Yonkers, New York. Sadly, but true, sometimes it's not the denial of loans, but giving loans that are punitive, as in predatory lending, that disproportionately, in an insidious manner, affects people of color. So I think these are ways to complicate rather than just give simplistic explanations. These dialogues about segregation still remain. Yes, they are difficult, they are unsavory, but whether it's discrimination, prejudice, continuing xenophobia, unequal access, topics of imperialism, of neocolonialism, we find that the effects are long, like enduring. For instance, a study in Milwaukee showed that decade after decade after decade shows the continuing impacts of redlining. And even things like profiling, which groups of people get access. It could be linguistic, who has an accent, who has a name that does not sound, quotes, appropriate, and they are denied access to housing. Yes, the trends are changing, so that's good, but it's not still all equitable. Headlines by professors at SUNY and elsewhere, which I share with my students in my classrooms, have research that show that yes, there is increasing diversity, but segregation still persists. So that's mixed. Others show, for Long Island, for instance, here in New York, studies under cover camera have shown the continuing patterns of discriminatory practices that mask the equal access. And yes, we find practices that ensure that some places are increasingly becoming more diverse, as in Queens, in this study that the student, in one of those undergraduate research, which today is undergraduate research there at SUNY Cortland, they will soon become grad students and presenting, hopefully, in conferences like this. This was just a couple of years. We are based on a book that we read. Students themselves went ahead and did their research presentations about hometowns, everywhere from Brooklyn to Bronx, Yonkers, and towns in Long Island, fielding questions from their fellow undergraduate students, faculty members, even a college president. At other times, the students present at national conferences or international ones, all the way to Cuba. And we have posters demonstrating their work and their mentors showing some of the work they have done or at the geographic conferences. Going beyond undergraduate research to grad school in Binghamton, representing some of the students from Cortland who could easily be presenting in today's grad conference. That's the current president of the AAG. The work we do as scholars, reviewing student research, working as external examiners in dissertations. Now I'll move on to some empirical studies that I have done. A lot of the work that I have done independently have used census data, United States Census data, that are publicly available. So they're called PUMS, Public Use Microdata Sample, which underscores the kind of disaggregate work that I think gives us more insight. You might know about things like unequal access through movies and books like the Green Book. But here I'm talking about the journey to work, commuting. So a lot of my work on commuting using US Census data has looked at what types of transportation mode do people use. And when I say people, I look at different groups of people. So I only have a couple of slides to illustrate some of this work. In this first one, I'm looking only at the people who use public transportation. But the main message is that foreign-born residents, so that's immigrants, so I've incorporated immigrant status, but all immigrants and recent immigrants into this gender and ethnic analysis, that Black women especially have the highest dependence on public transportation for their work trip. So whites, Latinos, and Blacks, almost 50%, well over 40% for Black immigrant women, unequal access to transportation for going to work. How about the work trip itself? What I'm doing in this particular chart is actually comparing apples and apples. So I'm only looking at people who have access to a car. I've already removed anybody who depends on public transportation. And the focus now is on the travel time, again, provided in the census data. How long does it take to get to work? And then making it even more complex. So it's a multivariate analysis by looking at the destination of the workplace, of the work commute. So do the people work in the city or outside of the city in the suburb? Do they live in the city and do a reverse commute? Is it a suburb to suburb commute? Compare the white population with the Black population. The disparity arises only when the destination is out in the suburbs. As many as 4 minutes difference for the one-way walk trip, or 3 minutes, but no disparity, nothing significant when it's a city destination. That might seem insignificant, but it really is big, or it amounts to much. Whether it's 3 minutes or 4 minutes, that's 6 minutes a day, 8 minutes a day. 8 times 5 is 40 minutes a week, times the number of weeks in the year. And that's a higher time burden placed on the people who have to go to work in the suburbs, especially in this case, the Black population. That's the thesis, empirically documented, of the spatial mismatch. Continuing in city after city that I have done this, whether it's in the Midwest, Kansas City, Detroit, segregated, upstate New York, Buffalo, or even immigrant locations like Miami. An additional thing that I did was to see what are good commutes and what are bad commutes. So in this typology will be the happy faces in between and then the not so good ones. So I consider the ones that are good, convenient, because the people here have short commutes, very short times, and they make a lot of money. So I'm including income into this analysis. Convenient commutes means that you have a short work trip, but good money. However, there are those who have what I call compensatory commutes. The work trip is long, but it comes with good compensation. The work trips that are low income are compromised either because the time spent is a short one for low income. The worst, double whammy, would be the constrained commutes based on my typology. Now, classifying which groups of people are more likely to have which of these 4 types of trips, you can see that men, Black and white men, are more likely to have those good, convenient commutes, even compensatory ones. Not so for women. Women are more likely to have the low-income commutes. And sadly, it's the Black women who are in fact 10% points higher than white women to have constrained commutes of long travel times to low-income jobs. Clearly, we can see how prevailing concerns of the gender wage gap is still at work. I don't think I have much time for jokes, but the point is some groups of people, in this case, women of color who go to work in the suburbs, do not make enough money to account for those kinds of restricted access. Sometimes it's to work, at other times it's just general movement. But not to stop on a negative tone, there are historical and contemporary evidence of activism ranging back to Rosa Parks. This sad story, putting a face to the topic, actually took place in Buffalo. Cynthia Wiggins, who lost her life because of policies that prevented somebody who is willing, desiring, and making an effort to go and work in suburban Buffalo, but who does not have a car, and was killed because public access was denied to that particular mall where she was a service worker. No, it's not just the US. We could go to other locations. Here are South African women, once upon a time, showing their activism and protesting the past laws which restricted movements back then. The research work can continue as it does in some of the recent work that I am doing with colleagues. This handbook on gender and mobilities now incorporates other dimensions, whether it's mothers that I have done, people with disability, migration, or other locations of conflict, and women's ability to rise up and consider these realities. I think I have a few more minutes to show you another work area my research on livelihoods. Much of this is collaborative, so the emphasis on collaborative work with other scholars, which pervades much of my work, whether it's contributing to chapters to books or edited volumes. In one of my favorite topics, I call it the toilet paper. What we tried to do there with some colleagues in Nairobi is to see the transformation from these kinds of ugly scenarios, unsanitary toilets, known as flying toilets back then, to these much more modern, healthy structures in Nairobi known as eco-toilets or toilet malls. Post-2010, and work that was done by graduate students, people like you, who did the field work and did a survey of where the eco-toilets were located and asked the users what their perceptions were under the regime of neoliberalism. As an example of one of the eco-toilets being opened by the Minister of Public Health and Sanitation. Eco-toilets in Nairobi, some of them are in the downtown area. They also come with facilities and services because they charge money and they make up for that money, everything from vendors to cleaning, but people have to pay. And the survey was to look at what people thought of the provision of these paid sanitation services. Here's a map. The inset shows that there are many more eco-toilets in the central business district of Nairobi. And yes, there are others also on the outskirts. Here's an example, for instance, of an eco-toilet in one of those slum locations on the outskirts. Our research question was to ask, in what way does the privatization, instead of you not paying, but for users having to pay, can it be considered equitable sanitation? I'll move straight on to some of the findings. When we asked the survey respondents, who do you think benefits more by the provision of these paid eco-toilets? Majority felt it was women. So thumbs up, as in women benefit a lot, not just because the eco-toilets offer a variety of uses, including clean water for drinking or bathing, but precisely for things like privacy and safety and women's unique biological needs, whether it's women who are pregnant, periods, incontinence, and so on. So there was general positive appraisal in the survey. However, respondents negatively evaluated these eco-toilets as being inequitable for something that geographers will consider. In terms of their accessibility and proximity, they were not evenly located. Users complained about it's not widespread enough. They would want more. This was contrary to what we had expected or hypothesized. And another dimension of inequity was the waiting time. Maybe some of you can relate to this, whether it's the young people you take to stadiums or movie theaters, or men being able to go to the bathroom and they're done in 5 minutes. So many more people in the survey said it took women a longer time, more than 5 minutes. True, according to, this is just a cartoon image I picked up off on the internet, but it could very well apply to England, where they refer to toilets as loo, or even in the United States, where there are policies at work to try and counter potty parity bill. Finally, what are the economic dimensions? Most of the women in the survey did say, especially low-income women who lived in those low-income areas, that this was unaffordable to have to pay. In the context of the reality of the feminization of poverty, we have to understand that this is like a constrained choice. It's mixed effects. It's nice to have good, clean toilets, which many people agreed with. But for those people who have to take bigger care of household needs, the sick, the elderly, in an era of the pandemic, things like water and livelihoods end up being of importance to geography research. In that area, we even refer to as political ecology. More recent data show whether it's in Sierra Leone, West Africa, Malawi, East Africa, women continue to spend more time for household needs, household water needs. This has implications for what time is there left for their employment or even for younger people. Studies show that if girls do not have good sanitary toilets, they drop out of school, especially secondary school, which is much more important. I really have to emphasize the creativity and research work of students in creative ways that could be cartoons or humor, as I highlight here for young scholars. One is a SUNY alum. Another is a 17-year-old, through a talk I had gone to, highlights what students can do and encourage them to participate in research themselves. My take-home message as a geographer is that we should, and we can, and we do use our discipline, geography, which, if we understand it as a discipline that looks at the human interaction and places with a focus on civic responsibility, it allows us a very useful intellectual forum for informed and engaged practices that enable social justice universally. I think geographers must take advantage of this unique perspective of the discipline to ensure practices for more expanded focus for a more equitable future. In conclusion, I'm using this quote from my colleague from long ago, who was one of my mentors when I started working here at SUNY back in 1987, 1988 actually. He writes from an article that he wrote back in 1975 that in the last analysis, it is the purposeful selection, use and reuse of a wide variety of instructional materials, and can I say research that contributes to instructional materials that provide the key to worthwhile teaching and learning. So if the goal is to diffuse ethnocentrism or myopia, here we are in 2025, 50 years after. At these times of crisis, we can hold on to the strength of geography in handling controversial issues that stems from the discipline's breadth of subject matter and global connectedness. Geography is a discipline that looks always to context as a prequel to interpretation and to the global perspective as an antidote to local myopia. In the last 2 minutes, or maybe 3 slides that I have, it's really to show you pictures and then hopefully open up to comments and discussion. I'll be remiss if I do not emphasize the international collaborations that I have enjoyed through fellowships. For instance, most recently with the University of Lagos, whether it's the graduate students working in the seminars of one of the colleagues, giving a presentation to students in a geography, transport geography seminar, or to those in a postgraduate doing their doctoral work, or giving a keynote presentation. The collaborative work that I enjoy, sometimes reviewing journal work, and our work, not only service, but also teaching and bringing our research to the field, as demonstrated in this agricultural farm that students and the community can participate in for urban agriculture in Lagos. Mentoring is something that we sometimes do not give enough credit to. But for me, it has been very essential in my research and scholarship across all cohorts, taking our undergraduate students to Racket Lake, working with other students, international conferences, New York African Studies, Geography conferences, AAG, place ethnicity conferences, and so on, showcasing the work of students and the experiential learning that goes on, even as I speak, right here at SUNY Cortland on a day like this, across SUNY institutions. I think all these activities speak to the importance of safe spaces, forging alliances nationally, internationally, and cross-disciplinary. I've worked with economists, with political scientists, with historians, with philosophers, with educators, and I want to say thank you for this opportunity for us to continue working and highlighting the positive messages so that whether it's people in the global south, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, should not be cast only as victims, but considered in their right positions as active contributors, accomplished and courageous leaders, agents of change, everything from environmental to educational and political leadership. And how about I just end there by saying, thank you again for this opportunity. Let's remain open-minded. Let's applaud the comprehensive forms of inquiry that we do as researchers that promote social justice and global equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We hope to have interesting questions from the audience, so don't hesitate, please.
I'm trying to see how I can stop sharing.
Okay, there should be a button normally. Yeah, good.
I'm not seeing it yet. Did I miss it?
I got it for you. I just
Oh,
stopped
thank
sharing.
you.
You're welcome.
Before I'll ask you a question, I could ask it in person, but Nance Wilson from SUNY Cortland. So thanks for sharing that you were doing this today with a bunch of us. So I appreciate it. My question really links to my field, which is literacy. And when we think about a lot of what you've talked about in being able to recognize the inequities by studying the different graphs and charts and things, in which ways do you find the need for critical literacy within the undergrads? And I'm more curious about how you help to build them to have it, but that could be a longer conversation later. So we'll do the shorter question, and that is, how is critical literacy important to the work that you're doing, especially when you're involving and engaging the students to prepare them for graduate work?
Thank you. Yes, it is a fascinating question. It's a very relevant one. Thanks for being here, Nance. Can I change critical literacy to critical thinking? Because that's what I am most.
You can, and we'll debate how they're different off this, because they are. But yes.
Okay. All right. Because that's what I think I have done more. So in the examples that I was alluding to, it would be, all right, remember how I said something about Nasirema? So it would be, oh, did you even think this is American? So let's read a book that's written by a non-American author. Let's move away from the single story because it's dangerous as it puts everything as though there are no contextual differences. So in my introductory classes, we read the book called Things Fall Apart, Classic 1. We're like, let's look at what is it about the way of life of the Igbo people, and how is that, instead of saying different, similar to the American way. So it challenges students to not just think of, oh, wow, there's strange people out there in some 19th, early 20th century. And we look at the contemporary realities of what's going on in 21st century United States. So whether it's the positive things of the value given to hard work, the importance of entrepreneurship, the family values, that is also shown in that book, or the negative elements of, wow, these are still patriarchal tendencies that are going on back then in that story. And is it still true here in the United States or not? So they're reading, but it's challenging them to be more insightful before they criticize one as superior and others as inferior. Another example that I said would be, okay, let's compare that location with this location. Maybe in this point in time, what's happening in Durban, South Africa versus Detroit, United States. But what this does, it allows students to be less defensive. So it doesn't seem like it's US bashing or it's male bashing or it's, they can look at other locations and be like, oh, once upon a time, there was a place where there was a gold rush. Once upon a time, there was a place where people were striving for more rights. There was a place where, oh, so it's not just over there. It happened here too. It's not just over here, it happened there. So you could use it contemporarily or historically. Nance, hopefully that answers some of the questions.
It does perfectly, and I'll talk with you soon.
Yes, look forward to seeing you. Is
I
that
do
Will?
see, yeah, Will's got his hand up. We'll take one last question and then we will get things moving for the next panel.
Yes, Professor, a question I have is, and I teach history, and we often think in terms of change, continuity, and contingency. One of the realities, it seems that when you're teaching students to understand complexity, it does engender cognitive dissonance that they have to persist and get through in order to then build in complexity and nuance and have that view. Is there anything that you do to try to help students deal with the cognitive dissonance that comes from bringing in more complexity as part of their analysis and their synthesis, almost as they're going through this kind of ongoing Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? Is there something that things you do to try to help students get through and deal with the dissonance in a productive way?
That's a deep, deep one, William. But maybe what I'm going to do is just defer to that colleague I mentioned, John Wilmer, who through the years that he was here, and we sometimes co-taught, actually would use those words, and we'll bring it up to those students in our classes too. The dissonance that they often face. My own attempt to solve that has actually let them be the ones doing the work. So that exercise that I said about, it's about my hometown, let them own it. Tell me what you have seen. Go study your hometown, whether it's worship places in Long Island, whether it's the policies that you see in Yonkers, whether it's the gentrification that's going on in Brooklyn. I think by letting them do the research, letting them do that, you can do it. And then we can place it in the context of what we are learning in class. Yes, you can present this at transformations. We're using a book that's written by 16-year-olds. It's about Southside Chicago. If 16-year-olds can write this, here you are, 17, 18, 20-year-olds, you can do the same. So that's my approach to try and mediate some of that cognitive dissonance. Thank you, William.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get the recording stopped.